In today's video, I'm going to showcase an exciting new function coming to Excel in the near future, the translate function. So before we look at the actual function itself, I want to quickly showcase the power of this function and some of the things it can achieve. So I've set up a couple of demonstrations here. They're not too complex, very, very simple. Obviously, they wouldn't be end user ready per se, but just as demonstration purposes to show you what this new translate function can do. So one of the things that the translate function can do is obviously, as it says, translate text. And so you can have an inbuilt language translator in Excel now. Now, to be honest, I don't think this is particularly practical, as I think most people would probably use some sort of web-based translator anyway, so like your Google Translate, for example. But you know, in the niche example where you do need a localized translator in your work document, this is an option now. So let's see what this can actually do. So I've got here some drop downs with the languages, like you would expect in your traditional, web-based translators. So this is my language that I'm translating from and translating to. So you can see there the drop downs. Here I've got my text boxes, so this is where I'm going to type the text into. So let's just type in a very basic sentence. So let's just say hello. Oh, I can't spell hello apparently. And as you can see in the other text box, you've got the translation up here. So let's make it a little bit more complicated. So let's say the day is Monday, because that's the day it is when I'm recording this. And you can see it's translated that in real time in the text box to the right here. Now I can change the translation language and it will translate it to that as well. So let's expand this. So as you can see, there's many languages contained within this list. So let's just find one. So I'm based in Europe, so more familiar with the European languages. So we've got Spanish here, for example, and you can see it's translated that to Spanish. We've got lots of different, so Chinese simplified, for example. Now I have actually had this verified by someone I know who is Chinese, who says that the translation is quite good for Chinese. And yeah, you can see there's so many languages here. We've got like Czech, Bosnian, all sorts of languages. So you can see this works pretty much as you would expect from a web-based translate service. So let's look at an example now that's more relevant to, say, the data world. So here I have just set up a very basic instructions page. So if you're like me and you have to produce a lot of reports for stakeholders, a lot of the times what you'll need to do as well is offer training on the actual document, but you can also include an instructions page within that document that details how to use the report, for example. So this is essentially what this is replicating. It's the instructions for how to use the report. Now, obviously, if you can read the text here, they don't make much sense. It's just for demonstration purposes. But say you have multilingual stakeholders, you might have some English stakeholders, but you might also have some Spanish stakeholders. You might have some, Chinese stakeholders, Japanese, whatever, So you might need multiple versions of this document in the past. However, now you can just have the one version of the document and let the end user translate in real time. So here we have just the instructions in English. So I've got it set here to English. And as you can see, we've got our text here. So we've got step 1, step 2, step 3. Now, if I want to say change this, so we listed Japanese, so let's list Japanese. You can see that this has now been translated to Japanese. And so now the instructions would be in Japanese. So a very simple instruction and a very simple demonstration, sorry, and showcasing the sort of power of this translate function. So let's actually look into using this function now. So I've got my blank sheet here, and what we're going to do is we're actually just going to look at the function itself and the components of this function. So it is called the translate function. So obviously if you just start typing the equals as you would with any normal function and then translate, you'll see you get it pop up here. So obviously I have access to the beta channel, so I can access this. So what this comprises of are three components essentially. So we've got our text here, so that's the thing you want to translate, the source language, and the target language. So I'll get into a little bit more on these languages later, because it's not as simple as you might think in terms of, saying English and Spanish, for example. I have had to do a little bit of work in the background to achieve that, and I'll show you that later as well. So in terms of the text, so obviously that can be anything contained within a cell. So if I just come out of this quickly, I can type in here hello, for example, and then I can use that as a reference point for my text in this function if I wanted to. Or like with any other function, you can just, hard reference what you're translating into the function. But obviously if you're wanting to dynamically translate something, that's not going to be such a great idea, but you can do this. Now, when we go into the source language and the target language, you see we get this drop down menu here. So you can actually hard code the languages in the function as well. But what you can see here is these sort of abbreviations. So these are the language codes, and that's what the actual function itself works off of. So let's look at selecting one of these. So let's select Arabic, for example, as the source language. You can see what has been put in here is the actual language code, not Arabic as you would type it out. So knowing these codes is kind of the key to working this function. And I'll show you a little trick that I've used to incorporate that a little bit later on as well. Moving on to the target language, obviously it's exactly the same in this one as well. So you can translate. So let's say I just put Azerbaijani in here. I could close that off. So what it would say is translate hello from Arabic to Azerbaijani. Obviously that's not going to work because this text is in English. So the way to get around that is when we actually come in here and we go source language, you can actually leave this blank. Leaving this blank, what that actually means is it will try and detect the language the source language, and then translate off of that detection. So hopefully, if I just press enter here, it will detect that this is English and translate it to Azerbaijani. And as you can see, it has. Okay, so that was just a basic overview of the function itself. Let's go back to the examples I showed earlier, and we'll show some more sort of nuanced ways of actually using the function and some of the ways that I've got around having to know these language codes, because quite honestly, with so many languages, it's not practical to know these language codes off the top of your head. But we have a way around that. So let's have a look at that. So I'm going to go into the instructions tab here that I had earlier. Let's just put this back to English just to make it nice and easy. So if we actually click on the cells here, you can see that, so in this sort of title for this this section, if we look in the formula bar, we've actually got the formula I've used here. So there's a couple of trick things to be aware of here. So where we're actually referencing the source text is in cell Z4, which is all the way over here. So those of you who are eagle-eyed will have noticed there's a little plus up here. So if I expand that, I've put the source text that I want to translate to the side and grouped it together so that I can expand and close that, as and when I want. So let's just look at this. So as you can see, I've clicked on where the text is, and when we look at the formula bar, this is actually the text. So it's written in as text. So this is what the formula is actually translating. If we go back here, so Z4, that is obviously here. Moving on to the next section. As I mentioned before, I've left this blank because it's using the detect language mode essentially as the source language. So it's picking it up as English. I could put English in here and it would work the same, but obviously perhaps I would, down the future might work here in, I don't know, a Spanish business and I'm typing everything in Spanish, for example. I could just type this in Spanish instead and it would still work. I wouldn't need to change the formulas or anything like that. So moving on to the next bit is where things get slightly interesting. So you can see here, I've actually got an XLOOKUP function. So this is where a lot of the pain points of using this, this function have been worked around. So let's actually look at this in a little bit more detail. So obviously the XLOOKUP is referencing this drop down here as English. So remember when we looked at the function earlier, it was using language codes. So if we put English in here, it wouldn't work. It had to be the language code for English. So we're looking up this English term and trying to find the code here. Now that is contained within the language sheet. So again, eagle-eyed viewers of you will notice I've got a sheet here called languages. And I've got this table set up here. Now, don't worry, I didn't have to type this out myself. I actually extracted this from a web page that Microsoft offers. So if you want to know how to do this, what I would suggest is go watch my web scraping in Excel video, and that'll show you how I accomplish this. But basically, if I just drag in the web page here so you can just see this. So this is the web page that I took the information off of, and if I scroll down here, you can see that the table I have in my document is basically this one here, and it's got the language codes in the second column here. So I've just extracted that table from the web page basically. And now what I'm doing is in my instructions where the drop down list is, all it's doing is looking up the word in this table and returning the language code in the actual function itself. So you can see that here. So the lookup value is obviously the drop down. The lookup array is the first column, so the thing we want to reference. And then the second column, which is B, is obviously where the language code is stored. So that's what this function is doing, and that's how we're getting around some of the pain points. It's using this XLOOKUP function and that just makes things dynamic. Obviously, small little things can help with this as well. So for example, in this actual dropdown, obviously, those of you who've done dropdown lists in the past will know that we've used data validation to achieve this. So if we actually look at that, so it's in the data tab and then data validation. So if we look at the data validation I've set up, you can actually see that we're referencing the languages sheet and we're referencing the column A essentially, which is this one here. So this is why the actual XLOOKUP formula will always return a result. It won't ever return, an error value in the XLOOKUP formula, because we're referencing the same values that are in that table, and it's set up that way on purpose using this dropdown. So that was just a very brief overview of the translate function that is coming to Excel in the near future and is currently live in the beta channel version of Microsoft Excel. I'm personally very excited about this function. I think it will be a very, very good addition to Excel. And for me, as a data analyst, I think there's quite a good opportunity there, especially working with multilingual stakeholders. That's going to be such a huge benefit, and honestly, a skill that might set you apart from other data analysts that might not necessarily know about this function. So definitely one to keep an eye on. I hope you found this video useful. If you did have any questions, please do leave them in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like on the video, and if you want to see more content like this, why not subscribe to the channel?